Peter Drucker argued that entrepreneurs are the carriers of innovation, who are vital to the economy in transferring resources from areas of low productivity to that of higher productivity. We're here to take up a powerful argument within the world of entrepreneurship that's going on today. The idea, the proposition in front of this House, in this debate we're going to have, is that entrepreneurs are born, not trained. We're going to do this in an Oxford-style debate. And I'll explain the rules to you in just a moment. But before I do, let me give you a sense of what we have in mind for you. This is going to be a free-form brawl. You've heard of the rumble in the jungle, the thriller in Manila. You know, we're bringing you a smackdown in the Windy City. And to help us do this, we have some leading experts and practitioners who I want to introduce. Scott Painter, founder, chief executive of TrueCar, whom you've met already today. Greg Becker, president, CEO of Silicon Valley Bank. This is the team arguing in favor of the motion that entrepreneurs are born, not trained. On the side opposite, we have Amy Wilkinson, author of The Creator's Code, a brand new book, which if you check Amazon, I believe in your category is #1 right now for new books. And her partner in crime, Howard Tullman, CEO of 1871, right here in Chicago. Give them all a warm round of applause. Our debate will proceed as follows. That's the last bit of comedy and good humor you're going to see for the moment. I've sequestered these two teams for the past year. They've been working to develop their arguments, to go for the jugular, and they're just sort of really chomping at the bit. We are going to take a vote to start. I want to find out what the audience thinks of the proposition. I heard some boos and catcalls and already sort of a rowdy audience. That's exactly what I want. I want participation. So we're going to take a first vote to set the level. Where do we stand on the proposition? We'll have an opening statement from one side for 4 minutes, an opening statement from the side opposite, another 4 minutes, and similarly, another opening statement from both sides. And then we'll go to rebuttals on the hoof. They need to come right back at each other. With the spontaneous responses. Then comes the good part. You will have the chance to put your challenge to one team or the other from the floor, with some egging on by your immoderate moderator, of course. And then, once we've done that, we'll give them very brief closing comments to summarize, and we do another vote to see who's moved the needle. So this is not about the absolute numbers, but about who persuades more of the audience. So with that in mind, let me say again the proposition. And one thing I will guard against, I'll do several things in this debate. First, I'll make sure that they stick to time. I'm going to be a ruthless tyrant, so I'm putting you guys on notice because it is unfair to the other team to overstretch your time. Another thing that debaters often do mischievously is they try to have both sides of the argument. They want to appear very reasonable to you, so you'll vote for them. So I'm going to insist that they stick with the proposition, either in favor of the motion or against. And in that spirit, I'm going to ask you also to do something that might be a little bit unconventional. That is, I want you to vote now in a forced vote. That means even if you're not quite sure, if you're sitting on the fence, you don't care, you walked in this room by mistake, I want you to vote. Either yes or no, that is in favor of the motion or against the motion. And I'll have exactly the same words and the same question at the end of this so we can have a proper comparison. To repeat, the proposition in front of this House is that entrepreneurs are born, not trained. Who agrees with that motion? Hands up. And again, it's a forced vote. You have to go one way or the other. Which way are you leaning? Let's have a good show. OK, and make a bit of noise. Those are the people who will favor this argument. Let's hear from you. OK, all right. Now let's hear from the people who are against this motion, who disagree.
All right.
OK, let's hear some noise from you.
Let's hear it.
OK, all right. I am going to call this about... boy, that was definitely the side against stronger.
60-30.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it won't be manipulated by these questions. 60-30. I'm going to call it 60-40. I should say 40-60. 40-60 is how I saw it. That is, the people in favor were 40% of the vote at the moment. 60% were against. That's the opening, and we'll see how the audience is persuaded by the end. OK, so without further ado...
Did you subtract the people that raised 2 hands?
No. Well, we are a very honest Economist crowd, excuse me. Plus, also, your enthusiasm counts. So we're going to turn first to the side in favor of the motion. Let's have a bit of an encouragement for Scott Painter, to give the first opening comments. Oh, you've switched. Okay. Well, you can still receive the applause. All right, come on up. Great, Greg.
Thank you.
Greg Becker. 4 minutes, sir.
Great. Thank you, Vijay. First, let me start by saying I am honored to be part of this debate and honored to be part of this program. I've admired The Economist for years and appreciate the programs you guys put on.
Flattery will get you nowhere.
That's okay. I also feel fortunate to be up here with such great debaters of this topic. Scott, Amy, and Howard all have incredible perspectives, even though Amy and Howard are wrong.
Now we start.
As we have this debate about whether entrepreneurs are born or trained, I want to start by clarifying 2 points that I think are vital to this discussion. First, Scott and I are focused on the fastest growing, most disruptive businesses. It's the Ubers, the Snapchats, the Facebooks, the Airbnbs, Dropbox, Tesla, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft.
TrueCar.
TrueCar.
Yep.
Not traditional small businesses. I believe small business entrepreneurship has a higher probability of being taught, but that's not what we're here to debate. Second, I would like to define trained as formal education that is focused on teaching people how to become disruptive entrepreneurs. Now, with those clarifications, I want to make my case that disruptive entrepreneurs are born and developed based on life experiences, not formal training, as Howard and Amy will contend. I will acknowledge that training and education can refine, harness, and clarify entrepreneurial thinking, but it's nearly melding the raw talent. Training does not create the disruptive entrepreneur. So what is the it that disruptive entrepreneurs have? Let me base my argument on a 22-year history interacting with thousands of entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley to Shanghai. What I've seen from the most disruptive entrepreneurs is the following. First, they are visionaries. They have the power of imagination that is unique because of the sheer scale and audacity of their ideas.
2 minutes.
They think big, they think bold, and their vision is clear. Training did not create their vision. Travis Kalanick, who wanted to change the entire black car, taxi, car-sharing industry around the world, I sat down with him in the early days, and the vision he shared after just starting San Francisco was total world domination. Total world domination. He just thinks differently. Number two, they range from moderate to extremely crazy. They are crazy because they are willing to think big, ignore obstacles, and risk everything for their vision. There's a quote from a 1997 Apple ad that sums this up well. Quote, "Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones that see things differently. They're not fond of rules. They have no respect for the status quo." About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. That was Steve Jobs' mantra. It's how he founded Apple and every company he was associated with. Number three, they are incredibly smart and are only willing to listen to incredibly smart people. They have high IQs, and the last time I checked, IQs can't be trained. Finally, they're better than anyone else at iterating, changing, and adapting. Obstacles are just an opportunity to swerve, not to hit a wall. So I would contend that disruptive entrepreneurs are visionary, crazy, smart, and adapt better than anyone. While I can share with you
30 seconds.
these ideas, Scott can help train you. It certainly wouldn't make you a disruptive entrepreneur unless you had the creator's code, the term that Amy will use. But my view is the creator's code is about DNA and what you learn on the journey before you become trained. So in the words of Steve Jobs, they push the human race forward, while others see them as crazy ones. We see genius. Ladies and gentlemen, crazy can't be taught, and neither can disruptive entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Excellent. So, on time and in praise of delusional and high IQs. Okay, let's turn to the side opposite,
So
please.
I thought I gave Greg a tip when I said you can't win a race with your mouth, but apparently not. So
Let's start the clock, please. Thank
all
you.
right, so here's what I would say. I think that it isn't about formal education, and that's really not what we're talking about. We're talking about what do you learn in the course of the journey. And the 4 things that we think differentiate an entrepreneur and make a successful entrepreneur are work ethic, which absolutely you learn by example and by watching passion which you may have. There's no question that you may be aspiring to world domination, but the truth is, as many entrepreneurs have had a life incident, they've had a change in their circumstances, something has generated that passion in them, and that's what drives them. You need a thick skin, and you need to persevere. There's no question, and you'll hear more of that from Amy. And lastly, you need a tolerance for ambiguity. There isn't one roadmap. It's really a complicated situation. So, having at 1871 400 companies now, the overwhelming thing that we agree on with respect to what you just said is that the ignorance curve is a tremendous competitive advantage. And not knowing how hard it is, not knowing how long the journey will be is really important. But having said that, we think you can't necessarily teach this stuff, but you can learn it. And you learn it by being surrounded by entrepreneurs, by a team of people who have a similar skill set and things like that. And the things that we would take away, the things that we teach our entrepreneurs, which make them infinitely more successful, are 6 primary things. They have to tell a simple story, and you have to tell people, if you're trying to motivate them, basically 3 things. Who are you, what are you doing, and why? And this is what drives the adoption. This is what drives building the team and building the business. 2, they have to understand that you start with what you have. It doesn't arrive fully blown. It doesn't arrive perfectly. It doesn't arrive all set. It's something that you build, and if you start to let feasibility compromise you, you'll never get there. So you really need to get started and then keep moving forward. Number 3, keep raising the bar. You have to be ridiculous, and certainly Steve Jobs was ridiculous in terms of that, but he was also a really interesting guy who would never look backwards. And Amy will talk also about this idea that nostalgia takes you nowhere, and looking backwards is a really bad strategy. You have to have in-game amnesia, basically to forget what didn't work and to keep moving forward and not to sort of dwell on the past. And when you're raising the bar, what Steve used to do, he was a great liar. He used to say every time he changed his mind, oh, I never said that. I never said that. And he didn't let the past become a burden in terms of where he was headed. Making cheap mistakes, clearly you have to make mistakes. When I raised my first money, I had been a lawyer for 10 years, and the venture guy said, we don't invest in lawyers because they think they always have to be right. And the game is to win, it's not to be right all the time. And so the thought that you're gonna make mistakes is an inevitable thing, and you have to develop a tolerance for that. Pattern recognition, clearly the idea that we've seen this movie before is again something that you learn from other people as well as you develop the capacity yourself. And then lastly, you really have to have an appreciation for people. You have to understand that a team of all type A's is never going to be successful. It takes a huge number of people, and I always like the Willie Sutton quote, and most people know Willie's first quote, which
30
is
seconds.
Why you rob a bank, and that's because that's where the money is. But the second quote is that he said his team didn't have to love each other. It wasn't a kumbaya experience. They just had to each do their job well, and making room in these organizations for a whole bunch of people with different skills is critically important to what's going on.
All right, very good. Give him a round of applause as well. So what did we hear? He had me intrigued for a while. He talked much along the lines of the delusional arguments from this side. We heard the team from this side, people with amnesia, people who lie, people who are wrong. But he did manage to get in the point that this is something that you can learn, which I think comes back to this argument of your side. So we're probably going to expand on this during the interrogation phase. Let's hear from the team in favor of the motion. Scott, with your opening comment.
So I don't know what could be more intimidating than Oxford-style debate with a Victorian publisher, editor. Like the idea of being invited to this is just daunting. The debate, I actually don't think you made a persuasive argument at all, Howard, with all due respect. It was sort of babbling. I do agree with Greg's point. At the end of the day, I'm here with my son, Luke Painter, in the back of the room. He believes that entrepreneurs are actually trained. And most of you believe the same thing. And the discussion about is it nature or nurture is all over the web. You Google this topic, it is divided quite evenly, and there are lots of debates. So thinking that we're at the Economist Innovation Summit and words like transformational and remarkable have been used, I do think it is fair to say we're not talking about entrepreneurs in the wild. over half of all American adults will be an entrepreneur by the classic definition of somebody who basically puts people to work. So this is not about just sort of run-of-the-mill entrepreneurship or self-starting. Entrepreneurship is a fairly modern notion. It's a French word. It's been around since the mid-1700s. It is, I think in this case, about exceptional entrepreneurs. This is about the Henry Fords, the Bill Gates, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Steve Jobs, the Larry Ellisons, the Michael Dells. And these are all college dropouts. I would say that, you know, there is no doubt that wisdom and experience are important things to apply, of course, the career of anybody, whether you are trained or not trained. So this is not about whether or not you can learn things as an entrepreneur. This is about the core DNA. So let me focus on the three things that we would argue are absolutely core to being an entrepreneur. And these are things that when I speak at business schools and you go to these self-selected rooms of people who have enrolled in entrepreneurship courses and you say to the room, who in the room is carrying more than $50,000 in credit card debt? Stand up. Because that's the first threshold as far as I'm concerned. Are you willing to actually take enough risk? Are you willing to be risk tolerant? And that is not a trainable thing. That is a hereditable thing. Risk tolerance has been studied by scientists over and over, and literally the ability, the willingness to risk everything or take risk is not something that you go into a classroom and learn. It is something that you are either born with and you have a predisposition for. And I would say to my son, do not become an entrepreneur. My life has not been easy. The risks that I have taken are not worth, well, maybe they are worth a reward, but they are not things that you would wish for your children. You want them to go to school. You want them to be trained. And if they surface as an entrepreneur, a true risk taker, then they'll follow that passion. I think the second is that entrepreneurs have a predisposition to solving a problem in a very innovative way. They're often called visionaries. Vision implies that you see something that others do not. So to be a visionary, you have to have the perseverance to actually say, I'm going to take risk, I'm going to stand behind what I believe, and I'm going to solve the problem in a very unconventional way. And most training is about solving conventional problems. And then I think the final thing, and this is really what it comes down to in these courses, where you say, who's optimistic and who's not optimistic. That is really the dividing line for me. Fatal optimism is something that I think is uniquely entrepreneurial and uniquely associated with very successful entrepreneurs. You have to be willing to believe that you're right in the face of every proof point that you are wrong. And fatal optimism is not something that you can get in a course, even if you self-select.
Very good. Finished on time. So, son, do what I say, not what I do. Seems to be the advice from our risk taker. To our final speaker on the side opposite. Your 4 minutes, Amy.
So we reject the idea that entrepreneurs are born. It's too self-limiting, and it's factually incorrect. And here are some of the facts behind entrepreneurs in the United States. The average age of a first-time founder is 39 years old. No one comes out of the womb with an innate ability to start a company. Now, why is it, right? There are a whole lot of things that you need to learn along the way. So there's a practical set of skills. Nobody knows how to do a term sheet when they're 5 years old, or raise financing, or file taxes, or do all the practical things that entrepreneurs have to do. That's just one part of it. We also have the opportunity to grow and learn and gain more confidence. And with each experience, you see entrepreneurs doing that, even if they fail. There are very high failure rates in entrepreneurship. But you see the data shows the serial entrepreneurs, second time, third time, fourth time out, they get better and better and better at doing this. It's learned. It's practicable. You see in the United States demographically that baby boomers are the fastest growing demographic of first-time founders. So why would you wait? If it's an innate characteristic, why would you wait until your later years? Millennials, in fact, as of 6 weeks ago, the data shows they are not starting companies in the numbers that we need. They are dropping off. So it is not Mark Zuckerberg, and it's not somebody in their 20s wearing a hoodie in Silicon Valley that's building the next tech app. We need that. The economy needs that. But in fact, the data is showing it's not that. So it's not an innate thing. It's a craft. Entrepreneurship is something that we get better at as we do it. And I've spent the last 5 years interviewing 200 of the top entrepreneurs in the United States for this book called The Creator's Code. The idea is we can all create and scale ideas. And the code are the 6 skills that come out of interviewing people like the founders of LinkedIn and Airbnb and Dropbox and Chipotle and Chobani and JetBlue and Under Armour and Spanx. And I mean, across geographies and across applications, these people have 6 repeated skills. And they're all learnable, they're all teachable. So I'll tell you really quick what they are and then how people here can actually start honing them. The first is called Find the Gap. How do you see something that other people don't see? And one thing that all of us can do is ask questions, right? So the average 5-year-old asks 100 questions a day. As we grow older, the education system, culturally, whatever, that drops off. So what do creators of great companies do? They keep asking questions. It's a skill that's very available to us. The second is called Drive for Daylight. How do you manage speed like a race car driver? There's great data out of the University of Chicago showing cognitive ability increases as you look forward. It's to-go thinking. Always look for the light on the horizon. We can train ourselves to do that. The third is called Fly the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. It's a fast cycle iteration loop. People like Reid Hoffman will say you have to throw yourself off a cliff and assemble a plane on the way down. That's what entrepreneurship is. But how do you do that? You learn to decide very quickly and act very quickly. It's something that we can all get better at. The fourth skill is called fail wisely. So we're going to fail. We're going to get it wrong. But we can hone resilience. And there's great research on growth mentality, growth mindset.
30 seconds.
The fifth is called network minds. So how do you bring brain power towards you? There are ways that we can grab people and their capacity to solve problems in new ways. And then the sixth is called give small goods. It's about paying it forward with generosity and favors. That's building relationships. We get better with that at with age. So all of these things basically back up the fact that we can learn, we can hone these skills, and founders of companies over 100 million in revenue, which is my data set, they are learning and training and getting better at that every day.
Great, very good. So, in a sense, aside from the shameless plug for your book, I can't believe someone on this stage would ever do something like that. We did find out that, in fact, entrepreneurship should be thought of as a craft, in a way, and some 6 ways to think about this. So you've heard the opening arguments. You've already got in mind the parameters of this debate, but how do we push it further? Let's hear from the team in favor. We're going to give 3 minutes for rebuttals. First, from the team in favor of the motion.
So, a couple things. Let me start with the point that I made at the beginning. The discussion here is 2 points to make. One is we're talking about our point of view is billion-dollar-plus disruptive companies. Scott brought up the point about entrepreneurship is everywhere, so that's part of it. But when you look at, there's a different point of view. There's different perspectives that have with the largest, most crazy, wild, disruptive ideas. So that's number one. Number two, I think about this breaking down into 3 parts. One is what you're born with, what you learn, and what you're trained. Remember, this is about what you're trained. Can you be a trained entrepreneur, right? So there's the part about what you're born with. That's some of it. This middle part, we're taking ownership for on this side, which is what you learn, right? So no one, when you're a kid and teaches you how to struggle and challenge and stuff, no one's training you how to do that. You may be learning it, but no one is training you. Training you, from my standpoint, is you go to Stanford, you go to different universities, and you learn how to be an entrepreneur. My point is that does not create large disruptive companies. So make sure you're dividing in these 3 sections. We own the second section. With that, Scott.
Great. So first of all, I want to say I'm actually much more relieved after hearing Amy's presentation. I think we're going to crush it. So, okay. Let me define what
Scott,
the debate.
I want you to don't be so reserved. Don't hold back.
Let me just say what this debate is not. This is not a debate about whether or not entrepreneurs can learn or gain wisdom over the course of their careers. Of course they can. That's a ridiculous assumption to say that they have to be born and they have to be isolated in this bubble and all of a sudden just invent all this stuff on their own. It's about this predisposition, this genetic, the heredity, the things that make you a great entrepreneur. It would be depressing for us to say to Americans that you can't come to America or be an American and do what you want. I mean, the whole American dream is about you can be anything you want to be. So even somebody who's not predisposed to be an entrepreneur should be able to go to school, learn some great crafts and some skills, and maybe thrive. But I live in a world where we're fighting for venture capital dollars. This is what Greg and his group does. We are about exceptional return. We're about really solving exceptional problems. And I think
30 seconds.
The idea that founder-driven companies, founder-led companies create more value is a very real thing. It's because the founder is in touch with the original vision and they're passionate about it and they infuse that into their company and they are the one that is driving that direction. I think the idea that a company is well run is absolutely critical to their long-term success.
Very good. Okay, let's hear from the side opposite. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, so with all due respect, Scott, I met your son and he is awesome. But I want to say that one of the greatest woman entrepreneurs is Sara Blakely, and you talked about risk tolerance and like we can't learn risk tolerance or it's innate. I don't believe that, and I'm using Sara Blakely as an example because her father every night would sit down at dinner and say, "What did you fail at today?" And you know what that is? She failed at sports, she failed at singing, but she started Spanx and became the youngest self-made woman billionaire. And so I think you can teach risk tolerance. We can all learn to fail wisely. Our parents have a big part in that, so does the education system. But countering the idea that you're either risk averse or not, I think that's incorrect. On the vision point as well, it's very hard to know where the economy is going with global connectivity and acceleration of technology, but we can learn to spot opportunities. And there are definitely patterns, reasoning by first principles, as Elon Musk does, reasoning by analogy, as Howard Schultz does. There are ways that we can spot vision in the marketplace, so that also can be taught. There's also a great study of twins. So everybody should look into this. There were 117 pairs of twins. They have the same genetic material. Intelligence is known, you talked about intelligence. Intelligence is thought to be at least 80 to 85% innate. But creativity, which leads to entrepreneurship and innovation, is only 30%. And so when you take these pairs of twins, imagine that one twin sits at home and one twin is out in the world experimenting, trying things, failing, learning. And by the end of this trajectory, after you follow these twins for 20 years, you find out that in the theoretical world, that the twin who's been out there is actually learning and creating and growing companies a whole lot better because of the creativity research on people who have the same set of DNA. And I'll let Howard wrap up.
So I just want to object to what Greg has said, which is I'm on record as saying that MBA programs suck. So I think we don't like this idea that it has to occur in the university context. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that every one of these sustainable powers, these abilities to be successful, is something that you learn, and you learn laterally. You learn by being surrounded by other people. I agree that it's not the sage on the stage, except in this instance, but by and large, it's something that you learn from living through it, and whether it's focus, whether it's flexibility, whether it's the ability to basically always be looking forward, all of those skills are things that we can actually demonstrate and teach, and those become the ways that entrepreneurs become successful.
Great. Excellent. Okay, let's give a round of applause for the teams. Now the fun begins. I want to turn to you, the audience. Let's see some hands. Just some ground rules again. Please identify yourself, and this time, make it a question and make it for one of the teams. We want to challenge them. Who said something that you disagreed with, that you want to push on? So let me just see a quick show of hands there. Okay, why don't we start here in the front row, and we'll go around to others. And again, tell me who you are and who the question is for, which team.
Sure. Hi, my name is Eric Wesson. I'm at the British Consulate here in Chicago, and my question is for the not innate team. You brought up some really interesting ideas about pairs of twins, but I was wondering what you think about the idea that maybe the skills for entrepreneurship are a necessary but not sufficient condition, and that you must have some baseline intelligence, determination, ability, and even though that doesn't mean everyone with all of those factors will go into entrepreneurship, that without those factors, which may be genetic, you cannot be successful, or it is far harder to be successful.
So baseline of intelligence or determination, is that what you're saying?
Or whatever, you mentioned characteristics you thought were important to entrepreneurship, so whatever those characteristics happen.
So I think from the research that I've done, you see different people with different capabilities, and they find something they're passionate about, or they find a problem that they want to solve. And yeah, I think that there's a baseline. You have to be able to learn. You have to be curious. You have to be able to, grow and all of those things. But I think most human beings have that capability. So from like the Chipotle founder, Steve Ells, he loves he's a classically trained chef. He loves cooking. And that a lot of people might dismiss and say, oh, hey, you're just an art history major and a guy that likes cooking. And he's gone and built an enormous fast casual restaurant company. Or that's one kind of intelligence maybe, that he likes doing that. There are other people who love fashion. There are other people who are curious about science. There are other real data nerds, right? I mean, so I think that there are different proclivities, but anyone can be an entrepreneur.
Okay, bold words. Let's go back to the audience. I want a question for the other side in the interest of fairness. Who's got a question? Okay, let's come here to the gentleman in the front row. Let's get a microphone. Make it a short and sweet question.
Great, thank you. So to the Born team, you did a masterful job of usurping the middle ground. That was great debate style, by the way. It was underhanded and beautiful. So you had DNA, you had learn, and you had train. If you're not allowed to claim the learn space, you're not allowed to claim it, you have to argue the DNA, can you still defend your position?
Let me go first. So I have 4 children. 2 are boys and 2 are girls. And I would say that if you look at how they behave in my backyard on the zip line, they're very different. Some of them are very eager to take a ride all the way to the top of the zip line and go all the way down, and others are very cautious and very reluctant and very pragmatic about how they approach the opportunity. You invoked Elon Musk, so I must, as a way of just getting to the classic sort of logic of the debate, ask whether or not this audience thinks that he was trained to be that remarkable.
All right, hold on. Okay, yes, I'm going to give you a short riposte. Come on in.
Okay, so
Go on.
So Elon Musk is a friend of mine. He's in the book. I just was with him a couple weeks ago in Los Angeles. I think he's unbelievably bright. I think he's trained as a physicist. I think he's basically Albert Einstein meets Steve Jobs. He's a physicist who loves design. That said, what very few people know is that he tried to get a job at AOL. How many people know that? When he was at Stanford in 1995, sent his resume, he called. He even drove over and hung out at the AOL headquarters, hoping that somebody would talk to him.
What does that prove? How is that salient?
It basically says that he's shy. I mean, and he would tell you he's shy. And so it isn't something that, I don't think he innately was out there saying, I'm going to build companies. He tried to get a corporate job. Then he went and built 5 unbelievable companies. But he learned through that setback and other setbacks to continue to persevere.
So you're sticking by your guns.
You bet.
He defends your. Okay. Well, since we have a disagreement, let's have an informal vote. This is not the final vote for the debate, but just on Elon Musk, somebody that we all know, arguably one of the great entrepreneurs of our age. Again, a forced vote. How many of you think Elon Musk was born that way and it was a successful entrepreneur because of his DNA, as it were? Hands up. Make some noise so we can hear you. Okay. How many of you agree with Amy that, in fact, it was the training, that it was learned? Noise. Okay, that's a pretty. It's a pretty split audience, as far as I can see, which means this debate still continues. We have a question from the app. In the interest of our digerati, this is a question for Howard. As part of your argument, you claimed that the work ethic can be learned. Says this slacker, I wish that were true. Hey. And you're being challenged. How can this work ethic be taught?
All right, well, first of all, this slacker is not slacking himself. He's blaming his kid because he says he hopes that his kids could be taught to cut the grass. here's what we know. We know that creativity is important, that talent is important, but there's no question that hard work trumps all of those other skills. It's just absolutely clear. And you learn that as much by example and osmosis as you do because it's something you're born with. The other thing I would say is if this was Scott's first company and he had done this from scratch, as believe me, Zook and a few of these other people have, I would say, that is sort of representative of the case. But the truth is, as Amy said, serial entrepreneurs are infinitely more successful, which means that the skill set and the talent package can absolutely be learned.
Isn't there a self-selection problem that the people we study are the ones who have already succeeded? And all the people who failed, I mean, when you say serial entrepreneurs, there's obviously people who have gotten to stages of success.
They failed before
and they failed along the way,
succeeded.
but they learned something along the way, to your point.
Right.
But the world is littered with all kinds of entrepreneurs who were total duds or who didn't learn anything or they learned the wrong things, right?
Exactly.
So how does your theory account for that?
Well, I think that, the fact that you're not necessarily going to be successful is not how you measure this stuff. I mean, we know in the movie business, for example, that there's absolutely no telling, there's no predictability, but it's the process of making the movie that's the real joy, that's the real thing. If you keep score only by math, if you keep score only by successful box office, you're never going to be successful. I mean, we're trying to train people to make a difference, not to make a living, not to make a bunch of money, but to make a difference. And that's ultimately what entrepreneurs do. They want to make a change, they want to make a difference in the world.
Okay, we've got a question for you. Who's got a tough question for this side? Hands up, there's a lady right in the middle. Quick with the hand there, let's get a microphone. Again, make it hopefully a tough question for these guys. They're getting off a little easy here. Please identify yourself.
Hello, Christina Mackay from Ernst & Young. We've talked about learning, we've talked about DNA. My question for your team is really when entrepreneurship is forced onto you. So if you lost your job or you lived through a natural disaster or something else, you're forced to earn your own money and support your family. In that sense, you weren't born to take risk. You had to take risk because it was put on you. What would you say to that?
That's a great question, yeah.
So I'll start. Scott may want to add. So it goes back to the point we made at the beginning, which is Scott brought this argument up, which I agree with, which is everyone is an entrepreneur to some extent, right? And we're talking about the most disruptive companies. The most disruptive companies. Those are the ones that, from our standpoint, that between what they have from a DNA perspective, and again, I would say what they learned early in life, causes them to be risk takers, to think differently. I mean, when you spend time with them, you can't help but walk away thinking they're a little off, they're a little crazy, there's something wrong with them. And it's the blinders on that I think is incredibly unique. And I truly believe you can't go to a school and have somebody teach you that. So again, we're talking about, from my standpoint, two different things. Truly anyone, I believe, could start a small business, can try something new, and you can learn to be a better entrepreneur. But you have to have the raw material to basically create and be a truly disruptive entrepreneur.
So I
Very briefly.
So I've had 37 companies. I would say that if I wasn't genetically predisposed to be fatally optimistic and take risk and innovate, that I would have given up a long, long time ago. I know remarkable entrepreneurs, Richard Branson, Elon Musk, and these folks. These are not people who went to school or through sort of an experience, figured out the way of the world. They're curious, they're wise, they learn from their experiences, of course, but they are definitely different.
All right, so let's get another question, this time for the, ideally for the side on this.
Can we address this question?
Sure, yeah, it is in a sense, this is another digital question. Isn't desire a key ingredient, and can that be taught? It sounds like a challenge to your team, so go ahead.
Okay, so all I was going to say is, and this is what every great coach says, every basketball coach says, that it's great to want to win, but the people who work and train and develop the skill sets to win are the ones who ultimately succeed. And so desire is, it's wish fulfillment, but hope is not a strategy for success.
Okay, let's go to the floor. Let me see, how many questions do we have? Hands up. Okay, we have enough time for probably a couple more questions. So I'm going to ask for probably a question for, we just had you. Let's go for another question for this side. Who's got a question for the team in favor of the motion? This gentleman here in the front row. Quick question, quick answer, please.
Yes, my name is Bill Lear with Athena Global Energy Solutions. No greater entrepreneurs exist than athletes and musicians. And a recent book comes out and says that the great athletes, LeBron James, the great musicians, the Beatles, only are great because of 10,000 hours of training and support. So they have the DNA, but they all acknowledge without 10,000 hours of training, they never would be what they are today. How do you account for that?
There are no short people in the NBA.
Very good, very good. I have to say, let's have a question. Hey, I resemble that remark. Let's have a question for. Who's got a tough question for the side opposite? I mean, really be sure this is a great question because you're going to close this out possibly depending on the length of the answer. Okay, I see a lady in the back. Are you waving or saying hello? No? Okay, the gentleman next to you then. Yes. Let's get a tough question. No. Please wait for the microphone. Thank you.
There's research
Identify
by
yourself,
John
sir?
Gartner, Jordan Brandt from Autodesk.
Thank you.
There's recent research by John Gartner, a professor at Johns Hopkins, who suggests that the reason there's so many entrepreneurs in American culture is because the people who came here took a risk in the first place. So we have a predisposed genetic pool that leads to a lot of entrepreneurship. I would say, does this support or contradict your theory?
Okay, somehow you managed to drive it home to a question here. I just want to say before I turn it over to Amy that the things that drives the most success, you know, frankly, in the basketball world are coaches like Coach K, who is a shrimp. But go ahead, Amy.
So in the genetic pool question on, you know, immigrant entrepreneurs, that's one of the things that's a policy debate right now. We have attracted a lot of talent into the United States. If you look at Silicon Valley, there are a lot of foreign-born founders. So I think it makes the culture or the economy great. And if you talk to CEOs across the United States, they're all in Washington, D.C., where I've lived for the last few years, arguing for H-1B visas and everything else to try to get more entrepreneurs here. So I think that that's part of the economy. I don't think, I'm not on the side that because you have some genetic composition that you will go start a company and it will be a successful company. I don't agree with that.
Thanks to the short question and answer, we have a little bit of time. Who had a hand up who's still burning? I see a gentleman here quick on the draw. Let's get a microphone here.
Vijay, can we go on the same?
Oh, okay. Well, hold off a second if you've got a quick follow-up. Go on, go on.
So the sort of 1998, 99, 2000 timeframe, I think widely respected as sort of the greatest wealth creation zone in human history, where just about anybody who went to business school became an entrepreneur. They stopped going to banking, they stopped going to consulting, and we had things like startup.com, the movie. It was a grotesque time for entrepreneurship. The people who should not have become entrepreneurs did, and it led to the biggest bubble bursting that we've ever seen.
No, well, I don't know. I wonder whether that's the cause and effect there can be discussed on a separate debate. You know, the misallocation of capital, delusional venture capitalists, et cetera. But let's leave that for the audience to judge. Okay, sir.
But I think availability of capital is what creates opportunity for everyone to say they're an entrepreneur and take risk.
Okay, let's go to the question, sir. Make it good.
Sam Laurier from Social Synergy Media. So I have a question for the opposing side.
Okay.
Let's say I spend hours learning piano, but I would never play as hard as I would try. I would never play like Lang Lang or compose like Beethoven. Even if I learned math, I would learn differential calculus. I would never come up with a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If you teach me how to make a term sheet or how to close a financing, will that make me Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg?
Okay, so I have an answer to that because I've studied what would be some of the greatest entrepreneurs in the United States, right? They had to scale over 100 million in annual revenue. A lot of them are up to $1 billion in annual revenue in 5 years. The reason to study these people or to aspire to be like these people is a sports analogy. So they might be the Olympians, right? But we can all play sports. Someone else might be a varsity level athlete. Someone might be a junior varsity level athlete. Someone might play Little League or might come up. So I think just in the same way, you can be an entrepreneur. You may not be Elon Musk. You may not be trying to take life to Mars. I mean, that's the ambition of SpaceX. Very few people would have that ambition.
So, Sarah, you can take heart.
But it can be learned.
You stink at a number of things you've told us. You can also stink at entrepreneurship, it seems, with a bit of hard work and effort and training. All right, so with that comes the close of the open session. We are going to give it over to closing remarks. I will just comment that so far, at least in the running, the quotes that struck me from the side against the motion pointed out that you can't teach this, but you can learn it, which makes my head spin a little bit, but that was the quote that popped out. And over here, of course, there are no short people in the NBA. Let's go to closing comments. I'm going to give each side 4 minutes to divide as they see appropriate amongst their talents. Let's start with the side in favor of the motion.
Well,
and let's get the clock to the promised 4 minutes as well, because it's at 3.
We don't need it. So I want to first apologize for being
delusional to the end, isn't he?
So
yes.
competitive. We were told this was about winning. I think on the merits of the argument, the logic behind it, I think we all agree that exceptional entrepreneurs are born. And the question is whether or not we're talking about everybody who aspires to be entrepreneurial and this romantic version of what is an entrepreneur. And I think the concession we would make, not to yield the middle ground or capture the middle ground, would be that, of course, you learn over the course of your life. You gain wisdom, you gain experience, and those things make you better at what you do. But it is those innate, DNA-driven, hereditable characteristics that make an entrepreneur a truly successful, a disruptive, an impactful entrepreneur capable of doing that. And it is very, very analogous to the things that make you a great NBA player are all about practice, practice, practice. Be anything you want to be. But it is a simple fact. Vijay will never slam dunk a basketball. And that's okay.
So cruel.
And that's okay. And that's okay. I'm summoning my inner Tony Blair. And I yield the floor to my...
So a couple things to add to it. I think Scott and I made the case, and I think the examples, whether it's the NBA players, it's the example about math and so forth. We're talking about the NBA team. We're not talking about grade school basketball and being a good grade school basketball player, a good high school basketball player. We're talking about NBA players and entrepreneurs. That alone makes the point that it is this born, there's some in this middle ground. I think we win our case even if we just stick with born. If you take the middle ground, there's no question that it's this born part. So that's number one. We got the middle ground. Second part, when I looked at the examples that Amy would talk about and read just parts of her book,
2 minutes.
To me, the examples go back to they weren't trained to be superstars. They weren't trained. They had this risk-taking ability and interest to never give up and visionary attitude and a craziness, because you have to be crazy to come up with these big ideas. For Travis at Uber to come up with an idea to change the entire world of black cars in the world is crazy. That can't be taught. And the final point is this. So one of the things that Vijay said when we were in the back, he said, this is you must win. You do whatever it takes to win this debate. So Scott and I huddled and we said, should we go all the way? And Scott said, yes. So back in the back, as we were getting ready for this, we were huddling with Howard, and Howard made the point, I could be on either side of this debate.
All right.
So I said I was a
Over
lawyer.
to you, sir.
So
Over
I said
to
I
you.
was a lawyer, which means I'm shameless. And,
Were you trained to be shameless in your law school?
I attempted to give them a massive, and I attempted to give them a massive amount of self-confidence.
There we
go. Look, I think that we feel that there's an opportunity here. That one of the problems, and it's funny because both of these guys are from the West Coast, and one of the issues is it only about the top 3 guys? You said before, where are all the failures? Where are all the people that didn't make it at the Board of Trade and now they're back driving a cab? And Uber was cited, but here's the deal. There's going to be 50 more companies every one of those will be successful because they will apply the Uber shared methodology to 40 other businesses, and they'll all be successful entrepreneurs. And this is what Amy says. This is one of the skills. You take transferable technology, you take new ideas, and you apply it in instances where you've identified a gap or things like that. That's something that you study and you actually can bring to the table and can learn. So I think the other thing, and you alluded to the 10,000 hours, that's sort of the first book, but the newest book is that just strength training and just practice is not successful even for professional athletes. They have to get into the head game and they have to figure out how to make their skill set even more substantial. And that's what we think you can actually teach, you know. And again, to the final sort of observation is about faculty and teachers in general, and they often express themselves in terms of what they taught. We don't care what they taught. We care about what people learned. And ultimately, you learn by doing, you learn from the people around you, you can learn to be a successful entrepreneur. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Okay. Amy, you have about 2 minutes.
So we've talked a lot about the big hero worship entrepreneurs. So Elon Musk or Richard Branson or Mark Zuckerberg. These people do exist. They are very, very small in number. They are outliers. The vast number of entrepreneurs in the United States, like firms less than 5 years old in this country, they create all the net new jobs. Like there are entrepreneurs everywhere, in every city, everywhere you look. And there are many, many entrepreneurs that are over 100 million in annual revenue. That's a very large number in the venture capital investment world or in the entrepreneurship world. So, you know, I think there's a little bit of ambiguity here around, you know, made or trained, and there may be some geniuses in the world, right? There may be Bach and Beethoven, and there may be some musicians that are just extraordinary people. But the definition of entrepreneur, the vast number of entrepreneurs that exist, they are trained. They get better with age. They get better through setbacks. Serial entrepreneurs learn over and over how to scale companies, and they don't have to be, you know, extraordinary ideas. So Kevin Plank was the sweatiest football player at the University of Maryland. You know, he was wearing a cotton t-shirt under his uniform that was weighing 3 pounds. He went to get synthetic fabric. That became Under Armour, right? That's a pretty ordinary problem. Or the Spanx founder was trying to, you know, cut her feet out of her nylons and then to wear underpants. This is an undergarment. This is a pretty normal problem that you see people having. Or there are 2 mothers in the East Bay of San Francisco, and they just wanted better nutrition for their kids. They have a company called Revolution Foods. It's over 100 million in annual revenue.
30 seconds.
They basically learned how to create and scale companies that matter to all of us. It's very learnable, it's very teachable, and it's very accessible. And that's an important thing for everybody to understand.
All right, very good. So you've heard our debaters, our gladiators go at it. Clearly no holds barred. You heard them twist and try to abuse the meaning of words. What is an entrepreneur? One side tried to make it as small as possible. The other side took the word trained to mean learned, right? You've seen every trick in the book, but I have faith in all of you to look through these shams and these devices to get to the meaning of it. And that's why we are going to do another vote. And again, it's exactly the same terms as the initial vote. I'm going to restate the proposition in front of the House, and you must vote one way or the other. And the final authority is me. This is a highly scientific poll. I and I alone will decide, based on my astute vision and judgment, what percentage of the audience votes one way and the other. So, are you ready to vote? Ready to give your outcome? All right. So, the proposition in front of this House: entrepreneurs are born, not trained. How many of you, and you must vote one or the other, hands up, vote in favor of the proposition? Hands up. Make some noise. Let's hear this. Okay, hands down. Hands down. And let's hear how many of you are against the motion. How many of you vote with the side opposite? Wow. That is a very, very close call. All right. I'm going to ask the people who said they're I'm going to do this again to be sure. How many of you, the people who voted in favor of the motion, stand up. Stand up, please. The same vote as last time. Stand up in favor of the motion. That's definitely more than before. Okay. All right. Hold on. Don't get too excited. Okay, now please sit down. And how many of you voted against the motion or with the team opposite? Okay. Listen, to my eyes, that is, it is not. It's somewhere, I'm going to call it a 50-50 split, to be honest. And I will actually, I will say the following. I will say the following. I will say the side opposite may be 52, 53%, and I will concede that point. But look at the starting point. The initial vote was 40-60. And so the challenge to the audience and to the debaters was, who is going to move the needle? And on that, I have to give it to the side in favor of the motion. Give them a round of applause. And also give a round of applause to our excellent, excellent team on the side opposite, who did such a great job.